Hey guys, I was watching YouTube and I watched this tutorial on this guy making this awesome chisel plane. So I decided to make one better, or at least mousier. Yes, that's a mouse in my hand. I just needed a reference for, well, my mouse. I didn't have a big piece of walnut like Suman did, so I laminated some stuff together. Mahogany, walnut, ambrosia maple, just stuff I had from other projects. You can never have enough clamps, or cramps as the British say. Now I'm just marking some guidelines for my bandsaw. My bandsaw ends up being underpowered, so I went over to the pull saw, and also I'm marking it right now for my router so that the bottom is totally flat. My router does a great job with a flat bed, completely flat, unlike the earth, which is round. That's right, flat earthers, the earth is round. I'm checking for flatness with the blade, and now I'm just planing it. I wish it was this good hand planing, but this 2 times speed. Marking it, I just used spray can and some tape. I think those are a must for a woodworker, and then I just hand draw some lines for the rest. I ultimately ignore these. Once I have it in my hand, I kind of gauge what feels good to me, and I just keep shaping it that way. Again, my bandsaw is very underpowered, which leads me to go back into my trusty pull saw. And this cut is just weird for my pull saw. The fine tooth and the coarse teeth are not doing much. So I kind of give up halfway, and I take it over to the big sander I have at work. You can just shape it by hand, but you know, I have a big sander at work, so I use that. However, I did make a couple mistakes on the sander. I kept it at the highest speeds because I just wanted to do it fast after work, you know, and then go home, but it kind of left a lot of burn marks. This is my favorite way to shape things now, with the spoke shape. Again, I got 2 of these and 4 blades for $13, which means like you could have 2 chisel planes and 2 spoke shapes. No big deal. So this one's actually cheaper than Sumans as well. And I think that blade, you know, it sharpens up. You know, I don't struggle too much. And it tools easy, like you can see here. This is full speed. Now I'm just deciding what my button would be and what. So I just found a piece of scrap from the glue up and drew button thing. I should have looked for a washer and made it like nicer, but I just went for it by hand. It looks like a toy ultimately, like a tool toy, which I like it. My daughter Amelia is always playing around here, and I'm not gonna give her that because it's sharp, but I'd like that thing, so cool for her and for me. Gluing it down with some hot glue. I used the Gorilla kind. This is a Gorilla brand gun and the Gorilla brand glue. It holds things down really good. I should have used a little more glue because ultimately I had to like clamp it down with my finger while marking it. This little marking knife I don't recommend. It was probably good, but I dropped it so many times off my table onto concrete. You're also going to see me place my router down with a flat bit. And the reason my head's there is because I'm looking really closely at all of my lines that I drew and cleaning it up with a chisel afterwards and adding glue to the hole and the inlay. Doing inlays is fun. It's work, but it's fun. And giving it just a little bit of shaping to it with 220 sandpaper. And then I'm doing some bevels with the spoke shave. Suman did it with the sander, but I liked using this tool that I bought, and I just sharpened the blade because this is the blade I'm going to use on my chisel plane. So I threw it in the spoke shave and shaped it, and then I went over it with some 120 and then 220 sandpaper just to make sure it looked really nice and clean. Using the old blue tape trick to figure out my depth, and using my drill press so that my holes are really nice and straight. Now, you know, in order to put this thing on, make sure you're using the right size Phillips head for your screws, or whatever head you're using for whatever screws, because you don't want to strip the wood with your screw gun. You also don't want to strip the head of your screw, so use the right size Phillips. That's right, there's multiple Phillips size heads. There's like a number 1. Okay, now for that super satisfying moment of oiling up your wood. So the walnut just gets so much darker The maple gets a little bit yellow, a lot of chatoyans. Okay, so here's a couple tips that I've learned doing this project. So in Mr. Suman's video, he says to use different tools to get the project done, right? And obviously I don't have that, big nice tools that Mr. Suman has, but I figured it out. I use what I have to get it done. And I suggest you do the same. When you watch a DIY or a tutorial and you don't have a certain tool, don't just start saving for the tool. Try and look at the ones you have and try and figure it out with that. Another tip I have that I exercised on this one is to practice the skills on your tools, because you don't want to practice on furniture, because it's much more important. Or don't practice on the things you sell, because again, that's much more important. So practice on your tools. Another way of thinking is don't spend too much time on your tools, because you want to spend that time building furniture. So sometimes you do one, sometimes you do the other. I don't really get married to my ideas. So is it better? No. I'm willing to guess they probably work the same way. But is it mousier? Absolutely.